Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, January 27th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 219 days, the game against Michigan in 304 days. We've spent a lot of time this week talking about NIL and some big picture college football stories. So today we're going to take it back to the Buckeyes and specifically to recruiting. So Ohio State is still wrapping up the 2022 class, but they've already got 4 commitments for 2023. And the focus of the program is really starting to shift there now. So that's where we will be focusing as well. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop recruiting analyst Bill Greene. He just released the first edition of his very popular series, Yes, No, Possibly, Probably, Unlikely, Maybe, which, as the name might suggest, gives his opinions on just how likely it is that certain recruits will end up being Buckeyes. So, Bill, thank you for joining me.
Hey, glad to be here, Tom.
So before we get into this, I wanted to let you explain how you do this for people who maybe haven't seen it before, because you do what my third grade teachers are always trying to get me to do, which is to show my work. So people can actually track the changes in each of these recruitments throughout the whole cycle. So why did you decide to do it that way?
I don't know. It just kind of came to me last year. And I've seen, to be honest, I saw Alex kind of did a thing at the end of every recruiting cycle. He kind of goes back and hits the highlights of a lot of things that went on. And I thought it might be kind of cool to do just like a diary, of the recruiting, the year in recruiting, and so I started last year, and we started it in April when the spring evaluation period hit. The coaches were out on the road, and I just continued it on, and I just added to it. So I didn't want people to have to go back and search 2 or 3 older ones. We just put it all in one, and I would always add an update in red, so if you just didn't want to read all the old junk, you could just get right to the meat and look for the red stuff. And it seemed to be pretty popular. People seemed to like it. And so I thought I was going to do a 2023 one again. People wanted it. Mm-hmm. It was fun for me. So, and I thought I'll start it again in April or maybe even later, because that thing got to be a monstrosity by the end. I mean, it was cut and paste, and it was like a book. And then, I don't know, people were asking, and I thought, let's start it now. Let's do one full year. So it's obviously ridiculous to try to predict a class 1 year out. We still don't know what Kristen Miller is going to do, and he's a couple of weeks away. So this is impossible, but it's kind of fun to do. And, guys are put on here that they may be unlikely today. They could commit to Ohio State tomorrow. This is a wild, wild west right now. I'd like to say the early recruiting is just the layup line. We're not even to the layup line yet. Guys are just now pulling into the parking lot to put their warm-up suits on. So we're nowhere near the layup line yet. So it's a way too early look. It's meant to be, just kind of fun and light, not to be taken all that seriously now. If you go back and look at last year's April update, there's a lot of guys that signed with Ohio State that weren't listed in that update. There were guys in there that didn't come to Ohio State that I had as locks to Ohio State. So it's fun, it's light, and we'll enjoy it.
Yeah, it's interesting to track the trajectory of certain recruitments over time where, someone is, pretty likely, and then this guy's definitely in, and then all of a sudden,
he's
something
gone.
happens, poof, and he's gone.
Gone. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that was kind of, I think, my favorite part last year was kind of being able to really track the trajectory and noticing hey, certain position groups seem to be doing better or worse than they did 6 months ago, and trying to figure out the why behind all that. It's if you're into recruiting, it is definitely a must read every time it comes out. Today we're going to just be focusing on the offensive side of the ball. We'll do a separate show on the defense for Sunday, so you can look forward to that. But today we're just doing offense. So we're going to start with the quarterbacks.
Yeah,
there are no locks there. No. But there are a lot of big names. So between guys like Nico Amaleva, Dante Moore, Jaden Davis, and that's if he reclassifies from 2024 to 2023, which is still up in the air. As Bill said, stuff changes. That's something that you might happen. Who from that group do you think is the most likely to end up as a Buckeye as of right now?
Boy, that's almost impossible. And that's why I actually added Jaden Davis, even though he's a 2024 guy. That I think they're the favorite to land, but we keep hearing that he could reclassify to 2023. He was actually in the 2023 class at one point. I mean, so he's switched classes already. So I could see that happening again. But then again, he may want distance between himself and Devin Brown. And that's going to be the tough part for the 2023 stuff. I mean, I think people can look at Ohio State quarterback recruits, can see CJ Stroud's only going to be around one more year. He's going to be out of the picture. But Kyle McCord, very highly thought of. Devin Brown, very highly thought of. So if you come to Ohio State as 2023 quarterback commit, you know, when's your road to the field? When's that open up? So I think 23 is going to be tough to get, you know, a top flight quarterback. But then again, you know, the reputation of Ryan Day, you know, we're going to see. We're going to see how that goes. Like I say, Nico Iamaleava, Dante Moore, the Lonergan kid. You know, maybe this is a year you take an Ohio kid and just to have a body in there that can play, but maybe not someone that you look at as a starter down the road. It's going to be fascinating to follow the quarterback recruiting this year. And if Jaden Davis would reclassify to 2023, I mean, he would probably go right to in for me.
It's so interesting that Ohio State has lost Quinn Ewers, Ohio State has lost Jack Miller, and somehow the room is still, you still classify that quarterback room as just loaded with talent. That is
absolutely
starting to think Ryan Day might have some sense what he's doing with the quarterback recruiting piece of his job. At running back, speaking of coaches who know what they're doing in terms of recruiting, Tony Alford. At running back, I think most people listening to the show probably know the name Richard Young, and that he's one of the most highly sought after prospects in the class. He's, you know, one of those Alabama, Ohio State kind of battles probably. Where do you have him on the scale right now?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to make a prediction right now, I think Ohio State's the favorite. I wouldn't list him as in, but I would list him as probably or maybe probably plus. I think they're in great shape there. I think Tony Alford has done such an amazing job, you know, forming that relationship. And you know, we saw Richard last June. He was on campus and, you know, looks like an NFL running back already, even though he's 16 years old. You know, this is a guy you chase. And I do think they need two running backs in this class. So I think Richard Young would be number one on the board. And then there are a few other big time backs that they're going to chase, and they might be able to pull two big timers. Because I think the backs, I don't think they look at it like the quarterbacks where they don't want to go to a class with another great quarterback. But the backs, they don't necessarily want, you know, 150, 200 carries a year. So splitting time is not a bad thing as you head toward the NFL. So Richard Young would be top of the board dude that I think they're the favorite for. But, you know, when you're going against Nick Saban in Alabama, not the same as going against, you know, Mel Tucker in Michigan State or, you know, Vince Marrow down in Kentucky. This is a little different animal right now, but I think they're in great shape for Richard.
Yeah, this is like the recruiting equivalent of Ryan Day's, you know, when the talent is equated, you know, games on the schedule where you don't have a huge talent advantage. That's Ohio State recruiting against Alabama or some of those other big names down south.
No doubt.
No matter who he's going up against, Brian Hartline always seems to do a remarkably good job. These wide receiver conversations are always like some of the most fun for Ohio State fans, I'm sure, to listen to, because, you know, this time of year they're always on a ton of elite players, and then Brian Hartline always does a really good job of closing on, you know, 3 to 4 of them. It seems like every single year. So I guess let's start with a guy who had planned to announce his decision last fall. That's Karnel Tate. He was sort of perceived as an Ohio State Notre Dame battle at that time. And then he delayed that decision. So where do you think things stand with Ohio State right now?
Yeah, I would have him right where I had Richard Young, just as a probably or a probably plus. You got to out recruit Notre Dame to get him. I think the Ryan Day offensive system, the Hartline ability to teach, I think gives Ohio State a huge advantage with Karnel Tate. He's a kid from the Midwest. So it's not like you're trying to steal this kid out of Florida, even though he goes to IMG. He's from Chicago. His dad was with him. He was in camp last summer. I think he was there twice. And everything is clicking there. And I think this is one that I think if it does end up coming down to Ohio State and Notre Dame, I think, you know, Hartline will win this one. You know, but then there's always the thought, I was told during the Bishop Sycamore game when IMG came to Canton, I was told to watch out for Alabama, that they hadn't really started their full court press yet. And if they did start to press for Karnel Tate, that, you know, that would be one to watch. But I think OSU versus Notre Dame, I think Hartline will win that one. OSU versus Bama, we'll see. I probably would still give the edge to Hartline there.
All right, you mentioned he goes to IMG, but he's not really a Florida kid. There are a couple other guys who are out of Florida that I did want to ask about. One of them is a name people probably know, Brandon Inniss. He was committed to Oklahoma and then decommitted after Lincoln Riley left. The other one is Hakeem Williams, who is not as high profile as Brandon Inniss, but it sounds like someone that you like quite a bit as well. How would you handicap Ohio State's chances with those two guys?
Yeah, with Inniss, the big key is, will he go, 2,000 miles or more to USC? He's got a good buddy, Mario Williams, who they played 7-on-7 with, and he looks up to Mario as kind of a mentor. Mario's going to go there, and that helps for sure. But boy, that's a long way from home. So I'm not willing to concede this one to USC the way a lot of people are right now. I do think Brandon wants to be committed, and I do think the Oklahoma commit was made with good reasoning, and I think it was going to stick, and then that all fell apart. So now he's back open again. I think we'll see Brandon committed, spring, summerish. I can see it. So again, it's Brian Hartline, and Hartline, if you've seen some of the interviews you and I did one from camp with my Florida insiders, then I did one a couple of weeks ago, and they talk about Hartline more than they talk about Ryan Day. I think one of those guys, might have been Ricky Williams, called Hartline the face of the program down in Florida. He's the face of Ohio State. And, when it's Georgia, it's Kirby, and when it's Bama, it's Nick Saban. But Ohio State, it's Brian Hartline. And that's what those guys think of Brian down there. So that gives them a fighting chance with Brandon Inniss, for sure. And like I said, he may go to USC. The people that originally recruited him are all there. So it makes sense, but I wouldn't give up on Hartline to land Brandon Inniss. Brandon was up there for camp last year. He liked it. Got to get him up again, which, that group will come up again, that South Florida Express group. So see what happens there. With Hakeem Williams, I saw Hakeem a couple weeks ago too, and he's bigger than Brandon. He's probably faster than Brandon. He's probably more athletic than Brandon Inniss. Hakeem Williams is just very, very raw. But, my gosh, he's got a toolbox there to work with that is pretty amazing. And I won't be surprised to see Ohio State offer him here in the next couple of weeks. That won't surprise me at all, because he would be a different type receiver than Olave, Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Agbuka. Those guys are all that 6'1" guy. Hakeem is a 6'3", 6'3.5" guy with a catch radius that's about half the field. And he can run. He's a great basketball player. He can jump. He's just not polished yet. But you look at someone like that, and with Hartline as the polisher, you look at what this guy could be. He's got a body that kind of reminds me of Marvin Williams, but then he's got that athletic ability of like an Agbuka. So Hakeem Williams is man, he really impressed the heck out of me. And he definitely wants an Ohio State offer. He's got a lot of offers right now, and he's going to get a lot more offers, and he wants Ohio State. So I won't be surprised to see them offer him, and I want to see where that progresses.
Yeah, that's a good name to know, because, like I said, Inniss, I think last year he was high enough. He was the number one recruit the receiver in the class. I think we had talked a ton about him. Yeah, Williams is a name that I think is just
new name.
One to file away. Might be a name to know in the future. Yes. So someone else people have probably heard about, Ty Lockwood. He's already committed to tight end, but there's an in-state prospect to know there as well, Tanner Lemaster. He was someone who I remember people talking at camp last summer. He was there, and he was someone who could end up as an offensive lineman instead of a tight end. Yeah. Do you have a sense where you think he ends up, both positionally and also maybe where things stand with Ohio State?
Yeah, I know they liked him, but I think they saw him as an offensive tackle prospect, project type. Tanner's going to be playing Power 5 football for someone, I believe, or maybe like a Cincinnati, who I consider to be Power 5, even though technically they're not. Probably a guy's going to need a year or two to see what he is positionally. I could see Luke Fickell taking him down there and growing him up over a couple of years and making him an O tackle and a darn good one. Or maybe Tanner stays as one of those bigger tight ends, that Ohio State has used in the past. Maybe he's a Nick Vannett type. We got to see, and he's a guy that I'm looking forward to seeing just where his body is. I haven't seen him since last June. And these kids can change, Tom. I know we want to do our defensive thing later, but just as a point of reference, Cedric Hawkins was a kid that we saw in camp last summer as a DB, and he was okay. He didn't blow me away, even though he's from, my South Florida Express team that I know so well. But I saw Ced a couple of weeks ago, and the new Ced is not 5'10", 160 anymore. He's 6 foot or 6'1" and 180. Well, I like that Ced better than the summer Ced that we saw. So just to throw that out there, these kids can change. So, I want to see Tanner Lemaster and see where he's at physically. If to try to judge, is this kid going to be a tight end or is he going to be a tackle? He's someone Ohio State will keep an eye on. And if they decide to go 2 tight ends, this year, then, maybe he's in the loop.
You mentioned at the top of the show that, one of the things I liked about the way you structure your column is that you can kind of track how things are trending throughout the cycle. And This is the point of the recruiting cycle where in the last few years, things have always looked incredible for Ohio State on the offensive line. And then, they're in a ton of big names now. And then recently, once you get into the fall and it starts getting a little more serious, they sort of fall off the radar with a bunch of those guys closer to signing day. So I guess give me a couple of names that people should know who are maybe the most likely to end up in the class, at least for right now, with, the understanding that, hey, they have a new offensive line coach and we're still like 11 months from signing day.
Well, the interesting thing is there are 3 in-state guys that have offers. One of them committed, Josh Padilla. And all that happened before Justin Fry probably ever heard of Josh Padilla. You got Luke Montgomery, who I think absolutely that offer sticks. And Justin Fry, he was hired at Ohio State, and a few hours after he got hired, he was on his way to see Luke Montgomery play basketball, which told you where Luke Montgomery ranks. And Ryan Day went with him. So Luke Montgomery, they want him. They're going to fight for him. And I think they're going to get him. So you got Luke Montgomery, then you got Padilla. They've also offered the Austin Cybereld kid, and that was not an offer made by Justin Fry, and that kid didn't take that offer right away. So I want to see where that goes. So if you take 5 in this class and you think, what if Cybereld commits tonight and then you get Luke Montgomery, you got 3 Ohio kids there, and Padilla's a center for sure. Montgomery might be an inside guy. I can't sit here and tell you for sure he's a tackle. So, do you want to lock up 3 Ohio interior guys when you've got Chase Basanis out there? And, there's other names too. My God, I think I probably listed 10 guys. Caden Proctor's out there, Peyton Kirkland, Chase Basanis. This is going to be another fascinating one, just like the quarterback, how they handle the quarterback class here. This is going to be fascinating too. If they end up taking those 3 Ohio guys, then do they stretch to 6 in this class? If it's the right 6, 3, they're in really good shape right now, as they always are. In the winter, the previous year, 1 year out, they're getting everybody. Deontay Goodwin, Zach Rice, Ernest Green, they're getting all them guys. Stud was the champion recruiter 9 months out. The closer he got to signing day, he wasn't as successful. So what do they do on the O-line? 6 is a lot. 6 would be a huge class, but if the 3 Ohio guys commit, then you're almost forced to take 6. So this is probably the most interesting position group to me on the whole team is how does Justin Fry handle this offensive line recruiting?
Yeah, and the numbers there are going to be so interesting to watch because they only, as of right now, only have 4 on the offensive line for 22. And that was a class where I know you have talked about the fact that they probably should be at 5. So you may need to make something up. And then with all the uncertainty with the transfer portal right now, it's like, sure. Could it be 5? Sure. Could it be 6? Sure. Could it be 4? Hopefully not for Ohio State, but
not. Yeah.
There's a lot that's going to change between now and early signing day. But thought that was a really good look at a bunch of stuff. And we talked about probably 10, 12 people there, something like that. Bill wrote about close to 30 in his column just on the offensive side of the ball. You can find that on the Ask the Insiders board at BuckeyeScoop.com. And as I mentioned off the top of the show, we will have him again in just a couple of days to talk about the defense. So you can, I will have the link to that post in the post on the front page of Buckeye Scoop with, for this podcast, I'll have the link to Bill's full column so you can get all of that information. And then we'll have him on in just a couple of days to to kind of go through all of that as well. And you, if you like listening to Bill talk about football, and I know I do, and I'm sure you do as well, you can hear more of Bill talking about football on the Gives in the Bank podcast. You can find that wherever you find this show. You can, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, you know the drill by now. And if you like watching Bill's smiling face, you can do that at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. We put all of our podcasts up there as well. And as well as when we go see camp and go to camp and see all these kids, you can see highlights there. You can see interviews there, all that good stuff. It's all at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.